Lots going on in the show today. In fact, coming up in just a few moments, we're going to be joined by our WCTC legal analyst, Edward Weinstein, and we're going to get some reaction and some comment from him following, of course, the big story of the day, and that is the Dharun Ravi verdict, which we now have. A jury in a state superior court in New Brunswick has found former Rutgers University student Dharun Ravi of Plainsboro guilty of bias intimidation, which is the most serious count against him, as well as invasion of privacy, and this, of course, for spying on his roommate Tyler Clemente's intimate encounter with another man. Clemente, as you know, later committed suicide. That was in September of 2010, jumped off the George Washington Bridge. And while the jury found that Ravi did it and told others about it because of a bias against gays, he was not on trial for Clemente's death. So let's make that perfectly clear. The 20-year-old Ravi, who is from Plainsboro, could face 10 years in prison at sentencing, which tentatively has been scheduled for May 21st. He shook his head slightly after the verdict was read. Ravi also found guilty of hindering apprehension and witness tampering in the case. And the jury needed just 11 hours behind closed doors over 3 days, which began on Wednesday. But again, our top story, the verdict is in the Dharun Ravi trial from downtown New Brunswick, found guilty of bias, intimidation, and invasion of privacy. And here with some comment on that, rather, let's welcome in WCTC's legal analyst, Edward Weinstein, who joins us now in New Jersey today. Hi, Ed. Happy Friday. Good to talk to you again, and thanks for clearing some time on your schedule to join us today. I appreciate it. Word, of course, coming down a little while ago about the the conviction of bias, intimidation, and invasion of privacy. What do you know about these charges, and what potentially is he facing in terms of sentencing?
Okay, well, here are my initial comments. The first thing that really jumped into my mind as I was watching the live feed online as the verdict came down is back in December, the defendant, Mr. Ravi, was given a plea bargain. He clearly should have taken the plea bargain because under the plea bargain, while there is still an admission of guilt, he would have been guaranteed no jail time, and the prosecutor stated that they would have helped Mr. Ravi avoid any potential deportation. Now, obviously, with the verdict at hand, Mr. Ravi has exposure to both.
So that's completely off the table. He's facing a mandatory jail time and the possibility of deportation at this time, Ed?
No, it's not mandatory jail time. What I'm saying, Bert, is he was guaranteed no jail time under a plea agreement. Mm-hmm. Now he has the exposure. But there's other things that lead me to believe that perhaps jail time is far from certain for Mr. Ravi, such as the fact that Judge Berman maintained the defendant's bail status. In other words, if the judge really has in his or her mind, I'm putting this defendant in jail, that guy gets handcuffed right there. Bail is stated by the judge, and you have to come up with that bail in order to be released. But that did not occur here. Mr. Ravi walked out of that courtroom today.
So will he remain out of custody until the sentencing, or what's next for him?
Yes, there was discussion. I believe it was every 2 weeks Mr. Ravi is to check in with, I believe it's the probation department or something similar to that, but basically check in every 2 weeks with respect to he hasn't left the state, he has not fled, and so forth. So that's another. So procedurally what happens next is both sides, the defense and the prosecutor, they're going to submit briefs.
Okay.
And what the focus is on what's called mitigating and aggravating factors. And then on May 21st, there's oral argument. Mr. Clemente's parents, his family, can speak to the judge under the Victim Rights Act.
And what is the point of that? To perhaps try to plead their case for some clemency? Is that the point of that?
Exactly. You got it dead on, Bert. That's the idea here, and that's where many of the emotions are going to come out. That's where really, from the public's perspective, that's when people are going to determine whether or not, in their minds, in the public court of opinion, whether or not justice has prevailed. As we sit here right now, we hear guilty, guilty, guilty. People say, okay, this kid, deport him, put him in jail, throw the book at him. But there's an opportunity for the defense, even Mr. Ravi himself, to speak to the judge. Obviously, the prosecutor has their opportunity to talk about the only thing that can't be discussed, and I heard you properly state so before I came on today, is they cannot talk about the fact that Mr. Clemente and the tragedy of the suicide.
Right. Our guest is WCTC legal analyst Edward Weinstein. We're reacting to the Tyler Clemente verdict, which we just received in the last hour or so, and that is guilty of bias, intimidation, and invasion of privacy. Is there any appeals at this point, Edward, or does the appeals process kick in following the sentencing?
The appeals process would occur after the sentencing. I would feel extremely confident in saying that if Judge Berman were to determine jail time for Mr. Ravi, there will be an immediate appeal.
Now, that process can take a considerable amount of time sometimes, right?
Absolutely. We're talking months into potentially years.
Wow. Man, oh man. And you mentioned before that Mr. Ravi will have the chance to speak directly to the judge. Now, he did not testify on his own behalf. Now, will his lawyer have some input as to whether or not he addresses the judge? Can his lawyer dissuade him from doing so, or what's next as far as that goes?
Oh, his lawyer will absolutely, well, I won't say will make that ultimate determination, but in light of the fact that we're dealing with a 19-year-old young man, you better believe he's going to follow his counsel's advice. He followed his counsel's advice with respect to not testifying on his own behalf.
Right.
And he's certainly going to follow his counsel's advice with respect to whether or not he addresses the judge directly.
Yeah, but won't he take the approach like, hey, you know what, we did it your way before and look where we are. Now we're going to do it my way. Will any of that come out?
Well, whether or not that would happen between an attorney and his client, it could occur. I don't foresee it, though. Again, Mr. Altman is an excellent defense attorney, and number one. Number two, you're paying a lot of money for Mr. Altman's experience, counseling, guidance. So I would think Mr. Ravi's going to continue to follow what Mr. Altman, his legal advice is.
Okay. So
and that's very speculative as to why, and it was always, to me, very crucial in other interviews that I've conducted throughout this trial, the fact that they did not put Mr. Ravi on the stand is wild speculation, and at this point you almost wonder is there any regret that did not occur.
Exactly. That's why I was thinking that Mr. Ravi or his family or somebody would say, you know what, Mr. Attorney, you had your shot. We're going to let's try a different approach with this thing. But you think he'll continue to follow the advice of his attorney?
I would be very surprised to see anything but what Mr. Altman and his team of attorneys advising this young man to do. That's what's going to occur.
1:16 on New Jersey today on the New Talk Radio WCTC, the voice of Central Jersey. Our legal analyst, Edward Weinstein, joining us here this afternoon. Give me best case and worst case scenarios, Ed, if you could, for the sentencing. What's the best case for Mr. Ravi and worst case?
Well, the worst case scenario is easy. That's jail time, which would lead to an appeal. A best case scenario is going to be community service, probation, fines. His biggest exposure, and it might be one of the reasons, again, that he didn't take that initial plea bargain back in December. This fellow he's got a risk of deportation. And while we Americans know there's lots of people who live in the country either with, this fellow's here legally, obviously, but when you commit a crime of moral turpitude, then the federal government, the INS, can have you deported. And my concern for Mr. Ravi in that regard would be because of the high profile. I mean, this is an international case. There's been a live feed to India throughout the entire trial. that could force the federal government to deport someone who might not have been deported otherwise.
Wow. Now, how heavy is the hindering apprehension and witness tampering convictions? How heavy are those?
Those I anticipated. They are not second-degree crimes, and that's another way to look at this, Bert. Out of 24 guilty convictions, only 2 are second-degree crimes, 2 out of 24. And when you're talking about a second-degree crime, those are crimes that carry more of a likelihood of jail. So those that you just alluded to, those are not second-degree crimes. And therefore, while there's still some exposure, when you go from third degree to second degree, your exposure to jail time grows dramatically.
Wow. So what's the next 48, the next 72 hours or so for Mr. Ravi? Does he go back to his family and sort of regroup, or do they immediately start to map out their next step in the process? Is that what they do now?
Yeah, I mean, we're heading into a weekend. A kid who probably hasn't slept in a long time,
yeah.
and I get it. A lot of people in the public feel, hey, good for him, and feel that he was cyberbullying, that this wasn't a prank, this wasn't just a joke, that it was a biased crime. So a lot of people are going to want to see this fella go to jail, be deported. I've already seen on different media and websites and so forth where people are already clamoring for deportation, for jail time.
Yeah.
But of course, I'm giving you a more sober legal analysis, and that's not necessarily going to be the case. And an indication of that, again, right there is he walked out of that courtroom. A lot of people, there's a presumption of guilt now. He's found guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you need $1 million, and until you come up with $1 million, you sit in jail. You have to post bail.
Right.
That didn't occur here. And certainly, while I'm the last guy ever to minimize bullying, cyberbullying, and what technology has done now, and certainly the last guy in the world ever to with respect to gay rights, I'm a proponent of gay rights.
Mm-hmm.
I think gay marriage should be legal in this state.
Sure. Ed, one final question before we let you go. I mean, based on the nature of these charges and what he's been convicted of, will the judge or will the courts restrict his use of social media and using Internet access, and will be under sort of any restrictions in terms of his social media profile going forward?
No, I don't believe the court is going to impede his ability to go on social networks, Twitter, Facebook, and so forth. But I'll tell you this, you better believe Mr. Altman's having a little chat. Don't you say nothing about nothing.
Yeah, I believe it.
That could turn around for the prosecutor if this kid is honestly, but this is easy, if the kid's that callous, as some people believe he is, well, then he's going to get what he deserves if he goes there.
Ed Weinstein.
The judge doesn't control that. That's a lawyer's job.
Ed Weinstein,
keep your mouth shut.
Our legal analyst. Thanks so much for the time. It was great to have your expertise in this case, and we are going to have you in here for a full 2-hour show coming up in the next couple of weeks that I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, I think I'll be seeing you next week, Bert.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that as well, and perhaps we'll chat some more on this case as well as other issues.
Definitely.
It's a pleasure as always.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Have a good weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
Have a great weekend.